host, along with.
Wes Haubrick, how's it going?
It's going good. It's another Thursday night, and we get to talk about awful things and awful people.
Heading down to Hotlanta this week to talk about those
Hotlanta.
awful things and
Man,
awful people.
let me tell you, I remember this case. I remember
Yeah,
when this was happening. I mean, it wasn't local to me. It was like kitty corner practically on the map, but it was definitely in the news plenty.
yeah, most definitely. Would have been about 7 years before I was born, but I think last time I was in that city, I was 13 and had a Braves game.
No kidding.
Yep, it is a nice state, nice area though. I like Georgia. My grandparents actually lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the time, so
So, this all started, which has been lumped under the title the Atlanta child murders. Um, this started in the at the end of the 70s, like 79, is that right?
79.
So what was the first um, what was the first thing that happened here? What was the start of this as far
It
as the
was
public knew?
it was a 14-year-old black male who was snatched off the streets, which normally that unfortunately isn't newsworthy in many areas.
It's really
But
not. Yeah.
yeah, but it started a trend that went through about 28 victims from the years of 79 to 1981. And during a big stretch of that, there was at least one a week too. So you're talking about if this was a serial killer, one with quite the uncontrollable appetite for what he does.
That's quite a pace.
Yeah, most
Um,
definitely.
so kids just started disappearing.
Yep. It was in the middle of 79. You had Edward Hope Smith, who was also known as Teddy, and Alfred Evans disappearing about 4 days apart. And
Wow.
then their bodies were found on July 28th in a wooded area of the city with a 22 caliber gunshot wound to the upper back. So,
Shot?
yeah, the first ones were shot, although the later killings went to mostly strangulation, and some of them even had organs missing, which gets into one of the
Oh, that's just
theories
weird.
about it. Yeah, there's this whole thing bred more than a few conspiracy theories among specifically Atlanta's African American population. And
Yeah.
that gets into, a little bit later after they catch the suspect, Wayne Allen Williams.
Well, it that the pathway to finding him was long and wandering.
It really was. And, a lot of it, I think, was also serendipity, if that's the right word, or circumstance. With him
Yeah.
being caught after they were surveilling those bridges over the Chattahoochee River waiting for a body dump. And,
Right,
he
cuz
just
he
happened to do that.
cuz cuz bodies had been found near a bridge, right? At least one.
Yes.
Or one of the
Yes.
more recent ones.
Yep. The later killings had. Um,
So, I mean, come on, imagine, if you will, all these kids just disappearing. I mean,
yeah.
that's, and then turning up dead. What was I mean, was he keeping them? Was there any evidence that they were held for any length of time, or was he just taking them and killing them and dumping them?
There really wasn't any evidence, as far as I know, that they were being held for any length of time. So it was actually another theory out of the conspiracy theories with this, that it was a ring of pedophiles who were doing a big part of it.
Oh, I see.
Hold on just a second. I got to turn this down now that I got the stream active. There we go. That's better. Or mute YouTube or something. There. Now you don't get to hear that feedback. But that's one of the conspiracy theories. There was a guy in the community by the name of Uncle Tom Terrell, and literally they called his house Uncle Tom's Cabin
Wow.
after
Really?
after the novel. Yeah, and he was a pedo who had been convicted, and there's actually news footage of him admitting that some of the victims had visited his house. So, it's a
Man.
possibility. But then you also have, as far as I know, they didn't find any forensic evidence of sexual assault with the corpses or the victims.
So, were they mostly shot or some shot? Was the method of killing and disposing, did it change over time?
It did. They went in from the 22 into your more typical strangulation,
Hmm.
um, and then into later, as I was saying, with the organ harvesting
Y-
into butchery, where some of the corpses were missing, like their kidneys.
I mean,
And
what's that all about? I'm
that actually gets into another conspiracy theory that was floating around with this,
the
that it was the
those
CDC that was killing these kids.
for their
Seriously.
organs.
Yeah, because Atlanta is where the CDC is located. And supposedly they were, killing these kids, harvesting their organs, and going in with hypodermic needles to extract what became interferon, the cancer drug.
Right.
But then this also gets into all this totally weird batshit theories about them planting, AIDS in the community and AIDS being a conspiracy and all that.
Right.
Um, but, nevertheless, it did factor into the popular mind there as one of the theories, along with the pedophile ring idea.
S-
So,
s- there was a lot of heat on the police over this. In part because these were black kids. They were all black kids, right?
yes, yes, all of
Mostly
them
male,
were black.
mostly male, but a couple of
Hmm.
females. Um,
Yep.
and the local police caught a lot of heat over the racial aspect of this, like they weren't doing enough because they were black kids.
They did catch a lot of heat over that, and that actually gets into yet another conspiracy theory that was floating around, that it was the Klan who were committing these murders. Um, you
Yeah.
know,
The
interesting thing about that, Atlanta was a fairly progressive city in 1979. They were getting closer to getting more of a harmonious relationship between the races in that city at the time. And Klan activity was pushed towards the fringes.
it
But
really it really had gone into decline throughout the
yeah,
70s.
went underground for the most part.
Well, and the numbers declined is what I mean. Membership declined.
It did. And the main tie in there was a suspect by the name of Charles Sanders. He was a white man, he was a Klansman. And
He
he
he didn't
gets.
used to be a colonel, did he?
Well, I
Let's
doubt
hope.
that,
Good,
but
good, because that would just be weird.
he ties in with this with the victim Luby Jeter, who was, oh man, I can't remember the number in the sequence, but Sanders was allegedly heard over, somebody heard him say that kid fucked up my truck, he robbed me, and that's supposedly, he went after him and killed him because of that. And you know, with all this, honestly, I think the biggest conclusion that you could possibly make is that the Atlanta child murders were the product of a bunch of these different things happening at the same time.
Perfect
Uh,
storm type of thing.
yeah, I think the pedo ring is plausible, and I think that the clan connection is plausible because of Sanders and Jeter. But you
So,
know,
so perhaps, and we kind of talked about this before the show, is that the guy that was convicted and who had all of this stuff pinned on him, even though he might have been responsible for many, maybe even most of these deaths, maybe
they
not all of them.
They had evidence supposedly tying Wayne Allen Williams to 10 of them, that they actually brought forth that evidence in his trial.
Oh, in
But
the trial.
yeah, yeah, the defense, of course, tried to get it tossed out, but
Sure.
um, yeah, it wasn't. But still, the only two murders that were pinned on him were those of two men,
Yeah, the
the
FBI.
original two.
Right.
Yeah,
He was convicted of two. Um, the FBI on their official site says that evidence after the trial linked him to 20 of them.
that could be, and I think we're likely going to see a lot more with this too, with them reopening it. Just in, I think it was last month they did that,
Really,
reopening it with the
with
DNA.
DNA.
Mm-hmm. At Wits End says in the chat, I hate to say it, they probably didn't want to accept that it was a member of their own community. I would agree there. Um, Once you get down to it, and a lot of investigators came to this conclusion because it had to have been someone who moved freely in Atlanta's black communities, and that just wouldn't have been a white guy. Um, I
You,
was watching a CNN documentary about the whole thing where they had the noted FBI profiler Roy Hazelwood was talking about when he went down to Atlanta,
hmm
and he went in with a black detective. They were doing a ride along through these areas of town where the victims were from and frequented. And Hazelwood said literally, the people mowing their lawns stopped when I drove up. The people playing dominoes on their porch stopped. The people sitting out on the stoops of their houses stopped and just looked at us. And I looked at the guy I was with, and he said they're doing that because there's a honky in the car. So,
so it stands out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's the idea that that the community doesn't want it to be somebody from their community is true everywhere in every community. And
Oh, absolutely.
that
Yeah.
there's the Long Island serial killer that the Suffolk County police don't want to admit is a serial killer
Oh, yeah.
for
I'm sure
for for a
even
very recent example.
I'm sure even if you looked at like BTK, look at his church. That's another example of an
Right.
insular community that most certainly wouldn't have wanted it to be him.
And
Um,
the Soviets flat out refused to allow their investigator to make the conclusion that they had a serial killer. they
With
forbade,
Andre Chikatilo.
yeah, they flat out
Mm-hmm.
forbade him uh, from reaching that conclusion, which allowed the killer to go on for many extra years.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Which is interesting about, uh, which kind of makes Seattle a little different because, and I don't know why. And if we get Ann Bremner on the show to talk about the Green River Killer, this is one of the things I'm really curious about because here in Seattle, where we've had Ridgway and Bundy, uh,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't really get that. People wanted to know, who's this guy, and it seemed very evident that, he lives here, he's one of us, he isn't just traveling through. And there wasn't any of this, oh, it can't be a serial killer, it can't be this, it can't be that. It was all like, holy shit, look what's happening, let's find this guy.
Yeah, and
And
that could be because they're used to it more up there, but I
well,
don't know.
we weren't used to it when Bundy came along.
True,
Um,
true.
and so there was some kind of different thinking going on at some level in the police or something that allowed that the possibility that, there's these really awful people going around and they're killing lots of women, and we should, you know find him.
Mm-hmm. Oh
um,
yeah.
Whereas
It was
other
just,
other
uh-huh.
areas, they don't want that to be the case. They want.
Yeah, definitely less insular up there.
um, Yeah, so it's kind of weird though, and maybe it's a local way of thinking more than others, but there's this, to me, you want to know what the right answer is. You don't want just any answer. You don't want to put somebody in jail. You want to put the right people in jail.
I would hope most people share that sentiment, but
I don't think
I
I'm not
would
sure
fear
that
that they don't.
I'm not so sure about that they do at all. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of thinking of, we need to catch somebody.
Hmm. Well, and you have to realize as well that before Wayne Williams was caught, a lot of this was a racial powder keg in Atlanta. A lot of people literally feared that if it was a white man that they caught, that the city would go up in flames.
Um, well, yeah, that's not an unreasonable fear.
Yeah.
But one of the other things is that I find kind of odd is that, Atlanta PD's got to have a lot of black officers and whatever they're called, the management types, the chiefs and lieutenants and that kind of stuff. How
The
can
brass.
the brass,
Yeah.
how do you get away with not giving this full attention when you have so many blacks on the force? I mean,
That's a good question. And I mean, they started off small with the task force, but then they started building that up. It went to about 25, I think, of their local PD, and then about 35 FBI from the Atlanta field office. And it was about that time that Vice President Bush gave $1.5 million of federal aid to the case,
okay,
and that translates to about 4.1 million in today's dollars of money that they can use for whatever they want,
right.
and that was on top of $100,000 reward that the city put out for information, and that the 100,000 even being matched 5 times over by Muhammad Ali.
Really? Was that paid
Yeah,
out?
Good question. I'm going to have to look that up if that 500,000 was or not.
Any of the rewards, yeah, were any of those paid out? Because
It
do the cops get to collect rewards? Typically not, right?
No, I would think no.
So maybe they weren't paid out. So while you're looking up that, I saw that the FBI actually has the original letter from the Atlanta PD requesting help from the FBI.
Oh well. Yeah.
And that was written in August of 80, so just over a year um, after the homicides began. And it looks like they jumped on it pretty quick.
Yeah, I was just reading here. It was March 23rd when they officially reopened it. March 23rd of this year.
Oh, to examine the DNA.
Yep. Link from the Atlanta Journal Constitution is in the chat. And
Cool.
there's even, I don't know if we included a photo of the reward or not. There is one at that link, though. Literally a guy standing behind a huge pile of cash with two officers in uniform behind him.
I saw that picture and I didn't include it because it's like, what is all of that? Right?
Yep. Yep.
What does a pile of cash have to do with dead children? But that was the reward money
Yeah. 100K from the local government and 400K from Muhammad Ali
in cash.
in cash. Then on top of that, you had performers like the Jacksons, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., who all went to the city to help raise money for it for
I
the
want
families.
I'm gonna put up I found a couple of maps and
Oh, the reward was never collected.
wow,
Yep.
maybe the mice got into it.
Eating half a ton of pot, man. I laughed so hard when I read that link.
So these two maps are interesting because the one on the left shows where the victims lived, and the ones on the right shows where they were found. And it's a pretty dang close map.
Yeah. Yeah, you could lay those over top of each other pretty neatly.
Yeah. Um, one of the things that we talk pretty clinically sometimes, I guess you could call it, um,
Mm-hmm.
about these things. And I got to say that the more we do this, the more I have come to notice that um, killers murder families. There's never one victim. Um,
It's very true.
they, for each victim, there's an entire family that's just destroyed forever.
Yeah. And it's impossible to foresee all those ill effects that happen.
No. Well, and oftentimes, well, maybe not oftentimes, but at least some of the time, the killer's own family are also victims.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's almost like an intergenerational curse to some degree. Having, a dad who murdered 10 in the case of like, BTK, who
Yeah.
had a daughter, and so
Well,
many others.
so many others. Well, Bundy had family. He had
Oh
a
yeah.
mother and father and a sister, and a girlfriend.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Even Charles Manson had grandchildren.
really, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Ri-
It was at least one grandson I know.
Ridgway had extensive family, and it was,
Hmm.
people changed their names after this kind of stuff
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
and who could blame them?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Most definitely can't blame him.
but you know, and then you put on top of that that these are children. The worst thing possible that you can do to a family is have a death of a child. But to
Hmm.
have it done in such a way where they're just, some stranger takes them and kills them just out of the blue. That's
It's
um,
it's disgusting. I mean, I still find myself being completely repulsed by, let's say, the guy in the Mall of America who threw that 5-year-old off of a third-story balcony.
yeah. I mean, that guy has some serious mental problems. To be able to, you know, he was not hiding it at all. He just walked up to this couple and grabbed their kid and tossed him over the balcony for fuck's sakes.
He did, and I would like to see, honestly, the government treated as terrorism. And the reason for that is he's basically an incel. And
Yeah,
they've done this before. It's no different than the incel who shot up that restaurant in Toronto
right.
maybe a year ago. But I was just thinking, we hear so much bad shit, we dissect so much bad shit on this show,
Mhm.
and we would rarely get any chance to help. So I was just gonna post a chance that we do have now in the chat. It's the GoFundMe page for
Oh, for the
that
boy?
kid who was thrown off. Yeah. He's
That's
clinging to life in a Minnesota
Jesus.
hospital right now. So if you can, give a little or share the page even
Right.
with your
It,
friends.
it's last I saw that was over 500,000, but this that kind of ICU treatment is massively expensive.
Yeah.
And 500,000 sounds like a lot of money, but it does not go far at ICU.
Yep. It doesn't. So yeah, like I said, go to gofundme.com/Landon Prayers and give if you can. And if not, share the page too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, uh, you know, uh, that's probably the most proactive thing we can do right now, um, because it's really a helpless feeling. And I think that's one of the reasons why these types of funds take off the way they do. One, it's a horrific event. You know, these this family couldn't have been more innocent in this event. Um,
Oh,
lit
absolutely.
Literally just waiting to go into a restaurant with their kid when this monster
Yep.
comes up and tries to kill them. And so um, it's interesting um, the documentary about the disappearance of Madeline whatever her name was in Portugal.
Madeline McCann.
Yeah,
Yeah, Madeline McCann. Uh huh.
one of the people they interviewed was actually addressing the issue of, why does one story, catch fire and another one not? And they made the point that it's the circumstances that gets people's attention, and this is definitely one of those cases.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
it is. And, it's kind of sad too when you look at other cases. Young, blonde, white
very
children
often,
are the
very often.
ones who
often
Get
get
the most attention.
yeah. Um, and unfortunately, that is true. And you know who's to fault with for that? It's a
The
fucking
viewership.
it's the media.
Yeah.
It's the media that that decides which one gets to that gets the attention. It's a
They're the
fucking
gatekeepers, but
yeah.
they also have to go by economic forces like demand. So really, it's the viewers, in my opinion.
Well,
If the viewers were
it's
loud enough to say we want to change, they would make a change.
if they it's what they think the viewers want, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's I'm just they're not perfectly gauging demand,
Right.
but I
I
do
mean,
think that people could be more proactive with it though.
definitely true. Definitely true. Um, it's I guess the circumstances for little black boys, you know, disappearing while they're out playing is not as newsworthy as a little blonde girl getting snatched out of her bedroom while on
Unfortunately not.
vacation. And even if you know, you could easily make the case, I think, that switch the circumstances around and put a little black kid in the getting stolen out of the bedroom in Portugal wouldn't have caused nearly the ruckus that little Madeline did.
In at Wits End says, I don't know, Trayvon and Mike Brown got some attention. You know, that's true, but I think a big part of that was the perceived injustices there and also the rioting, especially in Ferguson. You know, I remember
Yeah.
that night because Ferguson is my backyard where I am.
Mm,
I'm maybe an hour from there,
yeah.
and just watching that city burn in the riots. You know, that was with Trayvon and Mike Brown. A lot of that was institutional too. The injustices that they suffered were institutional
Mm,
versus
those were police shootings, right?
well, Trayvon wasn't, but George Zimmerman getting off for shooting him could
Oh yeah,
be
yeah,
labeled could be labeled an institutional injustice. But yeah, Mike Brown, of
yeah.
course, was that. And you know, I read that his mother was running for some political office down there
I
in
think that
St. Louis
yeah,
County.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yes, they did burn that motherfucker down. A lot of that was out of town people, though. You know, there's a story about the night of the Ferguson riots. It's rather interesting. There's a guy that I know who manages for an auto parts store down there, and his house was right by that store. And when rioters were going to burn it down that night, he took his sidearm. He's a Marine vet. Took
Hmm.
his sidearm, walked out his front door into this crowd, fired a warning shot into the air, and dispersed them before they burned his store down. So,
That's what you got to do.
oh, absolutely. But
Yeah, yeah. The paid protesters or the Antifa.
Antifa,
Yeah.
the fascist anti-fascists, the
Right.
illiberal liberals, as my old boss would call them.
Yeah. 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 They tend to um, stir shit up
They
and
do.
and you know we've had that kind of shit happen here in Seattle, so we know what that's like.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, that also reminded me of a interview that we did at the 405 here rather recently
Yeah.
with crime journalist and sleuth, I guess you could call him, Billy Jensen. his specialty is taking on cold cases. People might know him from Michelle McNamara's book on the Golden State Killer.
Oh, okay.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark. He actually helped finish that book after she died, and he's a executive producer on the HBO series about it. So, got a chance to talk to him about what he calls True Crime 2.0. I'll
Oh,
post that interview in the chat.
very good.
But when he looks at a case, he only takes on ones that are cold.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Atlanta child murders would be right up his alley with something like that.
I mean, would they count as? I mean, does he do revisits like that or just unsolved?
He, he usually sticks to just unsolved, but I don't know if he would make an exception there, but
Well,
it
so
seems to be whatever captures his fancy
well,
when he
isn't
looks
that
at it.
isn't that true for all of us?
Very true.
But it does bring up something that I wanted to mention, and that is that, even though a lot of these murders were laid at the feet of Wayne Williams, not all of them, right?
No,
Not all of them have been linked to him, however tenuously. So what's happened to the rest of them?
no, even with the 20 that you mentioned that they linked him to post-trial, post-conviction,
Yeah,
you would still have at least 8 out there because we have a total of 28 bodies. So, but that gets into, what I was saying about it, I think being a confluence of
yeah,
these different things, where you might have had, the Klansmen kill the one, or even a couple of them, and then maybe the pedophiles with the others. But, there was other theories too that whoever the suspect was for these others, he was paying off the PD and the investigators.
really.
So, yeah,
The
I don't
Williams
know if there's
was?
a, but not Williams,
Or that
but
somebody
the,
was?
yeah, somebody who is remaining nameless and basically in the dark still
Hmm.
was paying them off. And, maybe that person was a serial killer. You had, for instance, Edward Edwards, the notorious killer, was in Atlanta at the time, but I'm pretty sure the child murders don't fit his MO.
Right.
I didn't
What
have time to take a deep dive into him, but
the confluence theory, I think people can understand that a little better at uh, this week with Notre Dame, and then the guy with the gas cans in Manhattan.
oh yeah,
You know how
man,
that
that was messed up.
Right. So, hypothetically speaking, I'm just totally pulling this out of my ass. Like, so what if the first few killings were somebody else, but Williams, thinks, this sounds pretty cool for whatever reason. I don't know how killers get to that point, but apparently they do. Um, I mean, even
Hmm.
Delphine from last week, right? She didn't start killing, as far as anybody knows, till she was in her late 30s.
Yeah,
So maybe,
that's true.
so maybe, maybe for whatever reason, it starts to motivate Williams to get involved in copycat, and then he evolves his own MO from that.
That could be, jumping on the coattails of whoever
Right.
the initial killer was.
I mean,
He has,
we see that all the time where there's somebody does a terrible thing, and some other idiotic, crazy person wants to do something similar, pretty shortly after.
oh, absolutely, delusions of grandeur and what have you. And that kind of gets into his background too, Williams.
Yeah.
Man, interesting background. The guy, first of all, the guy started his own radio station. when he was 12 and
That
was interviewing senators and public figures on it.
that's ambitious.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the guy was highly intelligent. But then after that, when he gets into his 20s and before, he was working basically as a stringer or what's called a night crawler. I
Yeah.
don't know if people have seen the movie, but this is basically a maverick um, mercenary journalist who goes out and shoots like fires, accidents,
Right.
and you know sells the footage to local media. So he knew Atlanta very well when you look at the city and the nightlife, and he knew how to stay hidden. But, and then on top of that, he was also working as his own amateur music promoter. He was trying to build a group in the mold of the Jackson Five.
Ah.
And that's where we had that bill
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
where
He,
it said performers, the advertisement, that is what that is from. So, but they say, that was the way that he was basically luring
there it
the
is.
kids that he was linked to kill them
It's coming up now.
was through talent, saying, "Oh, come and audition for me."
You know, it's interesting you mentioned Nightcrawler because one of the things that I found compelling about that movie was that um, the Jake Gyllenhaal character was clearly a sociopath, and
Oh
he
yeah,
and he portrayed it in a very realistic way.
he did. You know what his guiding light was when he did that, sort of?
What?
It was the coyote. He was going for a coyote look, and you
Mm,
see a bunch of different symbols of the coyote in the movie. It's kind of in there subliminally, but he would also do things like run to and bike to the set every day and starve himself to stay gaunt the way he was, to look hungry. But, I agree. That's one of the finest, purely amoral characters I've ever seen on a
yeah,
film.
yeah, and you also see him try practicing how to react to certain emotional situations because he doesn't know how to do it.
You do. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
which could be, uh, y- that's the kind of thing that might have derailed, Williams from, achieving more than he did because the thing is about the thing about sociopaths is they're not all Bundy-esque when it comes to mimicking uh, human emotions. Some of them aren't as
Yeah.
good at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bundy was a
Absolutely,
master,
yeah. Oh
um,
yeah.
but a lot of them just, people get weirded out around them, and they don't
hmm
know why, right?
And I wonder with Williams if it wasn't a bit of ADD too. Like he couldn't finish what he would start
True.
and he would have to bring up something better. So another thing that he spread was that supposedly he was recruited into the CIA
Oh, he said that?
too. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the CIA actually factored into that organ theory of the murders as well.
Yeah,
Because he
because
said, "Oh, I was killing for them."
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
the CDC and the CIA did it.
Yeah, because we all know how well departmental cooperate interagency cooperation goes.
uh, all those
Yeah.
rogue doctors abducting children.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have to work somewhere, right? So that's why they started the CDC.
uh,
Jesus Christ.
and the humor aside with that, I do have great pity on the families who put some stock into those theories. Because there are victims' families who do believe it.
Well, yeah, and people want. I
They don't
get
feel like they get answers.
they feel like they don't get answers,
Yeah.
and especially before anybody's caught and tried and convicted. You know, you're grasping for something,
Oh yeah.
and
Some answer, some degree of finality.
you know, in the early '80s and '70s, you know, the rumor mill was just as active as it is on the internet. It was just word of mouth,
Yeah.
and
And
so,
at Wits
so,
End
so
makes a good point there with the Tuskegee experiments too, leaving him paranoid,
well, yeah,
justifiably, but yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, very justified.
And then on top of the dynamic you were describing there, no
Right,
justice.
right. So you know you get very worried people gathering together at you know barbershops and churches and restaurants and cafes, and they're all going, "Did you hear this? Did you hear that? Well, I heard this, and I heard, you know," and then it just goes on and on and on. Just I
Yeah,
mean it's not unique to Atlanta by any means. It's a very common human experience.
absolutely. And you know, I think they are justifiably should be skeptical of those institutions, of all governmental institutions. In fact, I would hope more people in this country would be skeptical. But with
Overall, yeah,
skepticism, with skepticism, that does not imply that we should just make shit up either.
right,
You know,
right.
real skepticism demands to be convinced with evidence, with real evidence.
Yeah, and you know, and try to be a little consistent when it comes to how you view the government. Either they're super capable and super helpful, or they're, you know, not.
Yeah, yeah. Or they're incompetent.
They're either, yeah, and working against you. Which is it?
You know, that it reminds me of one thing that I try to abide by with my thought in all things, and that's Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity.
And or incompetence.
Right. Yeah, exactly. As the English would say with that, cock up before conspiracy.
Right. And you know, and this my main problem with conspiracies is that you just can't keep that shit secret.
Oh, absolutely. With every person involved with it, the power of it to stay hidden goes down because
Right.
that's one more link in the chain.
It's a logarithmic curve. You
Yep,
something you know and never tell anybody is the only true secret.
exactly.
As soon as you tell somebody else, it ain't a secret anymore.
Precisely.
And that just keeps building. The more people who know, the less of a secret it is.
Yep.
But
That's the one huge argument against something like the moon landing conspiracy.
right.
Uh,
And well, yeah, as one particular example. Yeah. Uh,
yep.
um, so, was there anything especially unusual about the trial that you know of?
It was fairly uneventful,
That seems
if I
odd,
remember
doesn't it?
correctly.
I
Uh,
mean, that's, I mean, that's kind of weird for a serial killer trial. I
it
mean,
is.
uh, huh? And
It was 1982 when they tried him.
he never confessed. Like some of them, you know, once they're caught, they confess.
Oh no, he was. I mean, even with recent interviews, he still says I'm innocent. He's a man.
Hmm.
What was I was looking for his age? Don't forget the two that he was convicted of. Nathaniel Cater, who was technically the last in the series, he was strangled and dumped in the Chattahoochee River,
Hmm.
was 27, and then Jimmy Ray Payne was 21. So we're talking about a sizable age difference here.
Right.
When many of the other 28 were 14 and around that
Right.
age.
Yeah. Teenage boys and younger.
Yeah,
Um,
down to about age 7.
yeah. The you know the thing that really counts against him though is that it stopped.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's a good question
it
as to
stopped.
why.
I mean, you can speculate, but one thing's for sure. I'm a big proponent. I like to tell people correlation is not causation, but
Yeah,
it's it's a pretty strong correlation in this case.
yeah,
You
unless
had,
there never was as big of a series to begin with, though.
but it was such a high rate of murders. I mean, good God, like every 2 weeks, another one. And that's not something somebody's gonna just stop doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Not at
unless
that
it,
pace. Not voluntarily. Not at that pace.
oh, absolutely, unless it wasn't as long to begin with, though.
Oh,
Unless
unless it was multiple people.
yeah, unless we're
Yeah.
looking at again multiple causes to the overall picture.
Yeah, potentially. Potentially, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it could be either way. But yeah, it did stop. Any which way you look at it.
Yeah. It's it'll be interesting to see what DNA turns up. And we may be revisiting this story in the
We
months to come.
may, most definitely. I mean, they've done wonders with like the Golden State Killer. I'm sure they could do the same here.
Yeah. Have what about Zodiac? Is anybody doing DNA stuff with Zodiac?
He was, I think, the next big one they were going to tackle with that after GSK.
That'll be really interesting to see if it's the Dahlia doctor.
Yeah, Odell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be something. Man.
All righty. Well, I think we have covered this one pretty thoroughly. Super horrible. I mean, all of the stuff that we talk about is really tragic, but this is especially heinous. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, God, it's it could have gone on so much longer,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm so glad that it didn't. And I don't have I don't care which way the DNA evidence eventually turns out, but um, that will be that will be interesting to see.
It will be. Definitely will keep our ears to the ground on this one. It was so prolific back in the day, they actually turned it into a miniseries in 1985.
Wow.
Yep, and that miniseries is actually on YouTube. If you search Atlanta child murders, it should be, I think, the third result you get is part one of the series.
That's and I think they're doing this, or they did part of this, Wayne Williams with Mindhunters, or they're going to.
Yeah, I think he is going to be factoring into the new season. Yeah, here is the link for part 1 of that series. I'll drop it in the chat. Well, I'm glad we made your data entry less drab at Wits End.
Absolutely. All right, let's put an end to this one for now, and
Definitely.
we will be back next week.
We
Good night,
will.
good night, everybody.
Good night.